Hi, welcome to class. So what we talked about today, if you go to Google Classroom, a few classroom reminders is please make sure you don't forget about your quote or question of the day. Um, I'm getting more and more where people aren't doing them, and please do make sure you actually answer them correctly and don't just put I don't know or just silly, goofy answers. That please make sure you take them seriously. I am reading them and starting to slowly but take off points for silly answers. Okay. But what we did today, we did the split between Sunni and Shia. There is a Google Doc attached and a Google slideshow. So if you open up both of those. So today's main lesson, we talked about, or at least I introduced it, that all religion throughout history always has what we call like a split, meaning it breaks up into different sections. So for example, I compared it to Christianity, the word Christianity, but there's a tons of different churches like Baptist, Catholic, Methodist, Lutheran, mainly because they split up because they had different ideals, but they still have a lot in common overall. And Islam is no exception to that. So Islam had a bit of a disagreement and they split into two groups. Um, Today, in today's world, most of these people do not call themselves I'm a Sunni or a Shia. They just say I am a Muslim. But you do see that a lot with the divide amongst the Islam people and some of their beliefs and how they've changed over time. So what you have to do is we are comparing and contrasting that on the left-hand side, you're putting down different ideas that the Sunni believed in, the Shia believed in, and then both. And so how you do that. So the first two slides, if I can get them to work, the first one is about their beliefs. So we kind of talked about that they had a lot of similarities in these first two slides. So what we pulled from that was that they both believe that Muhammad was their prophet and messenger. That is very obvious throughout all of them. They also believe in Allah. That is one key point that they both believe in Allah. Um, but what we pulled from that, and I put in red where I kind of put it into my own words. So I really do encourage you. It's fine if you need to copy because you missed class, but please try to, really actually read these slideshows and put things in your own words. You will do a lot better and have a better understanding if you try to do that. Rather than copying everything word for word that I have, it's a lot easier if you try to do it on your own. But right now is a good point in this video. If you want to hit pause so that way you can copy what's on my screen, you are welcome to do so. What we pulled from that slide, and we kind of talked about it talked about from slide 1 that Sunnis have a less elaborate hierarchy. And I put in red what that means. It means who they view as leaders. That hierarchy literally translates to kind of like at Cameron Middle School, how we have Mr. Armour, who's in charge, then Miss Bowman, then the teachers and students. Sunnis believe that most people were treated equal. Now, they had a little bit of a hierarchy system. They still had leaders, but it wasn't as detailed. And opposite of that, the Shias were very, very strict about their hierarchy. And I put in red that they actually believed um, that whoever is in charge usually has the most power. And they even talked about those people usually become saints versus the Sunnis do not. In the second slide, so if you follow along, in the second one, again, similarities, it talked about Allah, um, excuse me, is the belief in one God. Now, I starred and bolded number 2, and then this one over here. This is probably the biggest difference between these two. If I want you to walk away from class knowing excuse me, I'm hiccuping. Anything from class, it's this, that the Sunnis believed that when Muhammad died, that they believed anyone could be his successor, that they needed to have someone in charge to kind of, and they refer to it as a shepherd who, helps his flock with the religion, that the Sunnis were really strong, that they believed from previous experiences that they should be able to select the person, that it should be a group consensus because they wanted to have a good leader, not just because of blood. Shias, however, and I put a bunch of stars next to it, they were really big about Muhammad's bloodline because they believed Muhammad was chosen by Allah, so his family, his descendants, should be a part of the leadership. So they're going to argue that Muhammad's bloodline, so like his son, his uncle, his nephew, anyone that's in his family should have power. That those two are the ultimate divide. That most all of these facts that we're going to talk about, that is probably the biggest one that caused the division. Again, this is another good point. I scroll down a little bit that you can hit pause and copy any of this that I have on my screen. Okay, slideshow 3 also talked about differences. This one really talked about the idea of um, what Allah or people were in charge of. So Sunni really emphasized that, and it's real lengthy, and we just copied and pasted it from the slide. But Sunnis really believed in that they didn't have as much control, that Allah appointed people, that Allah was in charge. If someone died, it was because of Allah. And then in comparison, the Shias believed that imams were based on bloodlines, that anyone who had power, it was strictly because of that bloodline. Number 4, source 4, we talked about that Allah again has complete control. For them, they believed that sorry, I'm losing track. That people again kind of had more control of that. Source 5 talks about going to paradise, which we talked about in class, usually involved heaven. That when they say paradise, they actually mean heaven. So the Sunnis believed, so they believed in lots of things. So the Sunnis believed that they had to have faith in Allah. They had to be able to read the Quran, which is their holy book, accept Muhammad as their prophet in order to get to paradise. In comparison, the Shias believed you just had to believe in Muhammad and the 12 imams, meaning that was the people in power. So they only had 2 things you had to believe in to get to heaven. Sunnis had a list of them. Again, you can refer back to the slideshow to copy those if you need it. And then lastly, on the last slide for differences, that Sunnis believe that imams are viewed as saints. And we talked about in class why that's so important to know, because if you think someone is a saint, you're not going to go against them. So people that are leaders, and if you literally view them as a saint, you're not going to question their belief. In opposite, the Shias believe that imams were appointed by God, and they were the only person that could read the Quran. Now that is, I'm sorry if my dog's snoring in the background. That is super important to also note, because being able to read something gives you power. That eventually this is going to get them into trouble, because imams are going to go through saying, hey, the Quran is saying that you should pay me a tax and pay me money. And if you can't read it, you don't know if they're lying or not. So having that ability to read gave them a lot of power. Now, this last little part, please don't forget, it's easy to miss. So why did they split? When you go to source 7, the biggest thing I wanted you to get away from, and I just asked people to put it in their own words, that if you had to summarize what was the biggest reason why they split, most of my classes so far have said it's because they argued who should be the next leader after Muhammad died. And then obviously that broke apart to other little things like imams or saints, or they're not saints. But ultimately, it really came down to who is going to be that leader after Muhammad died. Now, lastly, I've said this over and over again. For the formative performance task, it's very much at the bottom. You are picking and describing a viewpoint from either Sunni or Shia. So you pick one, Sunni or Shia, and describe their beliefs and why they split. It has to be a full paragraph. It needs to be 5 sentences. You are welcome to use any of this information above. What I do not want you to do is, please do not just copy and paste it where it looks very obvious. It's just copy and pasted like a bullet point. Okay? You can put things and copy it, but please use sentence starters. For example, what I mean, say you choose Sunni. I would start a sentence saying one of the things that Sunni believed in was, and then I can copy the rest. But if I just put Sunnis have a less elaborate hierarchy, it does not flow right. It's very obvious that you just copied the entire thing and didn't put any thought to it. So if you go through each and every single one of this, it should give you easily 5 sentences. Okay, but pick one, either Sunni or Shia, and tell me what's their belief, why did they split? And per usual, if you want to refer back to the slide and say in source 3, they state this and copy something from the slide, you can do that as well. Okay, refer back to the sources, go back through this video. You can hit pause. If you need more time to copy stuff down, you can. But please try to put things in your own words. Please write 5 sentences. For the other assignment this week, Muslim innovations, we will do that Thursday. Okay, good luck.